You think of rock band and you look it up in the dictionary. Is that Led Zeppelin for you?
It definitely is for me. I have felt like that since I was a teenager, probably, but I feel that even more today.
Physical Graffiti, released on the 24th of February 1975, recorded at Headley Grange, a country house in Hampshire, produced by Jimmy Page. This was released on Swan Song, the band's first album to be released on their own label. 8 tracks were written for Physical Graffiti. The remaining 7 were from previous recording sessions they'd shelved over the years. This album was massive when it was released. At this point, the critics have kind of come around on Led Zeppelin after being very dismissive of the band, if not hostile to the group over the previous few years. Commercially, the album fared even better, reaching number 1 in both the UK and the US. It was the first album to go platinum before it was even released, just due to advanced orders. Dude, this is our first Led Zeppelin album, and I know how much we both love this band. And you chose Physical Graffiti as our first Led Zeppelin album. Tell me, man, what makes this album so special to you? I know we've listened to it for years.
Simply, it's so special to me because it's the one I spent the most time with, because it was really the only album that I owned. This is Led Zeppelin just at the peak of their talent, and they're really, I mean, they're seasoned veterans at this point. They've already done this 5 times. They've already put out 5 amazing records. So this is just par for the course for them. But, you know, I will tell you this. I've had so much fun preparing for this discussion today because I know way more about Led Zeppelin today than I did 4 weeks ago. I mean, just,
Yeah.
I was never one, in case this is the first episode you've ever joined with us, I've never been one to, learn a lot about the musicians. I just take in as much as their music as possible, but never really do a lot of research and find out a lot of information on the artist. And so I've really enjoyed doing self-titled with you because now I've gone back and learned about all these musicians that I've loved for years. So can't wait to talk about Led Zeppelin today.
Oh man, me too. And even for me, like over the years, I've learned more about the band because I'll read a random biography or you'll watch a documentary or a making of or something like that. But there's so much information out there about Led Zeppelin, and it's so well documented. And man, there are just like the stories of Zeppelin and like what they got up to is crazy. For me, Physical Graffiti. So one album that we recently did just a few weeks ago was the White Album by the Beatles. And you talked about that being a buffet. Like you like buffets, and that album is like the Beatles buffet. I feel like that's a little bit kind of the case here with Physical Graffiti too. It's their double album. You have everything that the band is known for, plus these sort of otherworldly type songs that is sort of a new lane for Zeppelin. Not totally. I mean, we've had the Stairway to Heavens and things that are kind of like, what planet is that from? But they really lean into it here. But yeah, you have classic Zeppelin, like Custard Pie or something. You have that going on. You have these sort of down by the seaside, like the country, sort of influenced stuff going on. You have these beautiful, beautiful acoustic pieces, the acoustic blues. You have, whatever category we're calling Kashmir or In the Light, that's kind of that otherworldly thing I'm talking about. Sort of an Eastern influence going on there. And then, you just have like everybody, like you said, everybody's at the peak of their powers. They're all clicking. And this is just the culmination of all of it. I would probably go so far as for me, this is also probably like their last great album. Um, when we think about just the band, we think about just Led Zeppelin. Uh, is Led Zeppelin the quintessential rock band, the poster child, the poster children for you think of rock band and you look it up in the dictionary. Is that Led Zeppelin for you?
It definitely is for me. And I have felt like that since I was a teenager, probably, but I feel that even more today because researching Led Zeppelin and really diving into their musical catalog, it's like, my goodness, you see their influence on so many famous rock bands that you can think of bands where you can take one Led Zeppelin song and see where somebody made their band, their entire sound and their entire career chasing the sound of one song or the style of a Led Zeppelin song. Or you could take one one Jimmy Page guitar playing style that he used in several songs, and it's like, okay, there's 8 bands that feature a guitarist that their thing is I play like Jimmy Page or I write Jimmy Page songs. So I think Led Zeppelin's influence is just profound, a profound influence on so many rock bands that are, you know, legendary in their own right.
You know, they do everything exceptionally well. They do the blues rock thing really well, but they also do psychedelic and prog rock and folk and just whatever else they decide to do. So you have that component of it. It's just like this really well-oiled machine. You have all the stuff that you think of when you think of a rock band, these excesses, the trashed hotel rooms, the jets, like the groupies. And some of that stuff can almost start to get a little dark when you read into it. But we're focusing mostly on the musical side of this conversation today because we'd be here all day if we talked about like the madness that swirled around Led Zeppelin. One of the things that you and I have talked a little bit about, like in the lead up to this conversation, is just, I mean, you think about it. This is a four-piece rock band, and each one of these guys is just a total killer. You and I've talked a little bit about Jimmy Page, and we'll certainly get into what this guy does. He's, the mastermind of the whole thing. He's the one who brought this all together. But he has this history of not only, he has credentials by the time he even starts Led Zeppelin. Not only, he's got his chops in the studio. He and John Paul Jones are studio guys. And so, you kind of have to be a perfect player when you are in the studio, or else you won't get work. So you're coming ready to play. Jimmy Page is playing on some of these classic recordings like Donovan, and you hear him on early Kinks albums, or singles, and the Who. And when he decides to get out of that, he joins the Yardbirds, this blues rock band that has incredible credentials, really known as like the blues rock band of their time up to that point, the home of Eric Clapton, and then Jeff Beck, and then Jimmy Page, this incredible lineage of guitarists. So he's like, I'm going to form my own band. And it's like, maybe it's just going to be like the new Yardbirds or whatever. And then he's recruiting guys, right? And he recruits Robert Plant. He finds Robert Plant kind of doing his own thing with this other band. And Robert Plant's like, hey, if we're getting a drummer, I've played with with John Bonham. We got to get Bonham in here. You've got to hear this guy play. John Paul Jones has worked with Jimmy. At the urging of his wife, he calls up Page and he's like, hey, I hear you're forming a band. Are you looking for a bassist? Of course, Jimmy Page knows how reliable and how the chops that John Paul Jones has. So he gets him in here. And each one of these guys is a force to be reckoned with. And every song that we're about to talk about, you could call them out and be like, boy, did they really shine here? Because I had that in my notes. Every time I'm listening to a song, I'm like, man, does Bonham really come through here? He steals the show. And it's like, well, so does John Paul Jones or Jimmy Page. But Robert Plant, man, Plant's vocals are a little different than like the Beatles or the Stones. And it's not always like the most friendly music to sing along to. Not only is it really hard to sing along with Led Zeppelin songs, it's also kind of hard to understand exactly what he's saying. But And that's what made me think of you here. It's like, what do you say to people when they would say like, "Oh, I don't like this band," or "I can't sing along with this music due to the nature of the vocals"? How do you feel about that observation or that knock on a band like Led Zeppelin?
I've got two trains of thought there. Um, Number one, maybe the vocals are so challenging that it's not made to sing along to, and you should just be quiet for a little bit and listen to somebody else sing. But I would also say what we would say to anybody who's listening to something challenging is you need to spend some more time with it. So I think if you spend more time with it, then what seems like something that cannot be sung along to now becomes familiar, and you are now singing along to it. So one of our favorite bands, Radiohead, I feel like gets this knock a lot. Um, I know a lot of Rush fans. I'm one who has not wanted to give Rush much of a chance because I don't like their vocals. Um, I was thinking, I think it's the Rover that the vocals in the or the melody line in the Rover kind of reminded me of Morrissey, something that I listened to from the Smiths when we were listening to the Smiths, where I'm like, gosh, was Robert Plant listening to the right song when he was recording these vocals? I think they took the recording, it was supposed to go with this other song, and they put it on the Rover, but then you listen to it 6 or 8 more times and you're like, this is perfect, and there should not be any other melody line or vocals sung with this song. So I think what I would say to people is you just need to spend a little more time with it, be a little more open mind. Here's what I tell my 7-year-old daughter all the time. She's listening to a song she's heard 3 times ever, and she's trying to sing along with it. I'm like, honey, how about we listen to it this time? Let's listen to it. Let's try to hear the words they're singing and remember them, and then when we've got them, then we'll sing along with it. So you know, so Robert Plant in particular, I'll speak about Robert Plant while we're talking about it. I remember when you first played me Led Zeppelin. Um, when we were in high school, and really all I'd heard of Led Zeppelin before then was things you would see in TV commercials or on classic radio, but I wasn't switching it on classic radio. If I had my choice of radio stations, that's not what I was listening to. Um, so I didn't have before you started playing them for me, I didn't really have any frame of reference. And then, so at the beginning, the hardest thing for me to come around on was Robert Plant, and
Mm,
obviously I'd heard Stairway to Heaven. I mean, everybody, you couldn't escape that song, but that song, I feel like the vocals are maybe a little more refined. Um, but anyway, yeah, I think Robert Plant is the luckiest man on the planet because, gosh, the three, I mean, I think Robert Plant is a genius and I love his work, and Led Zeppelin would not be Led Zeppelin without Robert Plant singing, and his work is amazing. But those other three guys, let's face it, you could have you could have taken one of 600 singers probably and thrown them on that stage, and something good was going to happen because those other three are amazing. But what I love about Robert Plant is, and Led Zeppelin in particular, is their background. They all had this steep background in music, and it was all a little different. It wasn't the
mm,
same. It wasn't the same background. They all had something different, and that brought this beautiful mix to this group. And what Robert Plant brought is soul singing. He
mm,
loved what he called black music, and he
mm.
loved music made by African Americans, and you hear that in his voice. And now, as I listen to Led Zeppelin, I'm blown away with Robert Plant's vocals and his work. I love his vocals. He because it's from a different it's from a different place. He does not sound like other rock singers. And while we're talking about the Rover, I just think that vocal line is so funny there. And I remember this as a kid. I would be like, Robert Plant is singing vocal lines that sound like how a guitarist plays a guitar.
Right.
And he's like singing the cadence and the rhythm a guitar would like do like a fill or something, or like
Mhm.
something in a solo. And I was like, that blew me away the first time I ever heard him sing like that. I was like, he's using his vocal cords as an instrument more than just singing lyrics and singing melodies. He's used, when they go into their improvisational jams, he's right there with them and will just improvise with his voice and use it like an instrument, like a guitarist or somebody playing harmonica would use their voice. So I think that's very interesting about Robert Plant.
It's funny that you say that about his vocals. I mean, the same is sort of true of Page when it comes to his playing style and the fact that it can be very lyrical, it can be very melodic, and the interplay between those two guys is in many ways kind of the heart of the band. Of course, the other heart of the band, of course, is that tight rhythm section with John Bonham and John Paul Jones. Just those two guys, between the two of them, throughout this album, the drums sound incredible. And what John Paul Jones brings to this album, not just through the bass, but with his keyboards, is funk. This album is funky, man, and it is not a surprise to me that this is the one. This is the first Zeppelin album that you wanted to talk about. I remember back in the day when you warming up to this album and getting really into it, and it's like it's tailor made for you because of that funk. And it's all over this album. It comes from all of them, right? Like you talked about Plant and the soul angle. Bonham, of course, he hits hard, but man, he can be funky. And then Page, of course, is so well versed in all this stuff. He can bring all of that stuff in to the table too. John Paul Jones, I mean, dude, just give that man a clavinet and be like, let's go. You just said, but then of course, he's playing these awesome bass lines too. But these guys really embrace that on Physical Graffiti. When you think about like Houses of the Holy, the previous album, Houses of the Holy, it was distinct from everything else that Zeppelin had done before it. It was a little less dark, kind of experimental, and really expansive in its sound. But this album kind of gets back to a lot of that darkness, I think. And I agree with you 100%. They're at their peak here. They're also massively successful. They're selling out numbers of tickets when they tour that is just mind blowing. Their albums do incredibly well. And of course, they're completely exhausted from extensive touring, which might be the number one most common theme of albums that we discuss on this show. Because for some reason, people do great work when they're coming off of these extensive soul sucking tours. The band goes back to Headley Grange because of that hall ambience that they use. The most famous example is when the levee breaks. It had that expansive drum sound, and they wanted to get that again. So they go back here. Jimmy Page said that he might have been the only one who really wanted to do that, who really wanted to like live there and stay there because the rest of the band members stayed at a hotel. But the winter of 1974, they recorded Kashmir, Custard Pie, Trampled Under Foot, In My Time of Dying, In the Light, Sick Again, The Wanton Song, and 10 Years Gone. And most of those songs were recorded with just a handful of takes, somewhere between 6 to 8 takes. And of course, those would typically just be the basic takes that they would then build upon later with overdubs. They'd start recording at 1 in the afternoon, go to about 1 in the morning. And then, it's an interesting decision here. Take those songs I just listed. That'd be a great album. That'd be a great album. And it was just long enough where it kind of pushed over the edge of just a single standard album. And so they kind of have this crossroad. It's like, do we just take that and have that be the album and maybe find one of those to cut? Or do we go back into this reservoir of songs, these bank of songs that we've had to shelve over the years and include those? And they obviously go with the latter. So the remaining 7 songs on Physical Graffiti have been recorded somewhere between 1970 and 1972. It's kind of all over the map. And what you get is Physical Graffiti, this combination. When you hear this album, do you hear that? Do you hear like, this sounds a little different? This like, or is it so cohesive and you've heard it so much over the years that it's like it just sounds like one big great batch of music to me? How do you hear that when you find out that it's like these are essentially 2 batches of songs that they decided to put together?
I didn't hear the difference. I just, from the beginning, I would have just assumed it was all recorded at the same time in one cohesive, studio experience. Do you think maybe the choice they made of including all those older works into this double disc album is that they thought maybe this was the last album John Paul Jones would do because
Mm,
he had considered breaking up or leaving the band before they were or during the time of recording or maybe before recording this album. That just hit me.
yeah, it's an interesting question because he is particularly, I think, exhausted by all of this. And of everyone in the band, he kind of had the most solid gig beforehand. And so you could see him being like, maybe this is it. Maybe I'm done. Fortunately, that's not the case. But you wonder. I'm like you though. It flows really well. Like, and I think the
I'm
part of that
glad
is
they
because
did.
me too. And some of it maybe is our history with the album. Like I didn't know that, I didn't, I found that out much later that this is sort of like there's 7 of the half of this album is essentially cobbled together from a bunch of other disparate sessions. But I listened to this album in totality and thought, well, that's just what it is. But it's funny. You can kind of hear now looking back, it's always easy to go back retrospectively and look at it. But you think about those songs. Kashmir, Custard Pie, Trampled Under Foot, In My Time of Dying, In the Light, Sick Again, The Wanton Song, and 10 Years Gone. There is a vibe in those songs, especially the whole Kashmir, In My Time of Dying, In the Light. It's this weird sort of like mystical Eastern influence thing going on. And then you have that Trampled Underfoot Wanton song, just like funk that comes with it. It's like this dirty, gnarly funk. And I, it could, I mean, you think about that, that would have been a great album. But I have no objections to including some of these. And we'll just get into it here with side one. We're going to start off with a song that was in the batch recorded specifically for this album with Custard Pie. The clavinet, dude. I love a good clavinet. John Paul Jones clearly does too. It kind of sells the song for me. So funky. Page's solo supposedly play through this ARP synthesizer, but he does use a wah pedal as well. A lot of sexual innuendo in Custard Pie, no way around it. I like how you can also hear Robert Plant's voice sort of break a little bit. Like later on in the song, and you can hear it throughout this album. It's almost like an effect, even though I think it's well earned. He had throat surgery in 1973. I don't think Plant ever learned there's a way to sing raw and loose and go high, and kind of protect your voice a little bit. But I don't think Plant knew how to do that, and so he just went for it all the time. And you can imagine the toll that that takes on your voice. And it's starting to get a little like you're starting to hear, as opposed to like Led Zeppelin 1 or Led Zeppelin 2, like you're starting to hear a little bit of that gravel come in. And I like that. I think that's character. I think that brings in some cool stuff. So I like it when you kind of hear it break up a little bit or falter just a little bit.
Yeah, his voice, that's something else that just like gives him a stamp, right?
Mm,
Where it's like it just can't be duplicated.
mm,
It's like the singer for AC/DC or even like somebody like Nat King Cole. It's like
mm,
there's just nobody can sound like that, which
yeah.
makes them super cool. It just can't be duplicated. So yeah, custard pie. I told my wife, I said, Led Zeppelin was the ones that opened my eyes to write, that made me realize that you can write lyrics and you can be as dirty as you want if you just use the right similes or metaphors. And that, I mean, Robert Plant was, I feel like that was his cup of tea. He
Yeah.
loved writing um about bedroom theatrics. So but yeah, this I feel like custard pie is like a good representation of, here's what we're getting into, and this is going to be a good representation of what you're about to hear for the next however 12, 13 tracks.
I love your thoughts on the Rover. The fact that this is Morrissey like, and the fact that it sounds like he's singing lyrics that could be over a completely different song. It's great.
So
I'm always going to think of that now.
which song does this one go to? I don't know. We need something for the Rover. Just put it on that one. It's like, all right. Is it in the same key? I don't know.
Well, this is oddly, this was actually recorded a separate time, right? So who knows? This was originally recorded for Houses of the Holy. It was first written as an acoustic song, which is kind of hard to wrap my head around. Cited as an influence on later heavy metal bands, Page has said that his guitar in this is just pure rock and roll swagger. It's just all about the attitude. I totally hear that, and it's funny. If you were to ask me, like, do you think the Rover was done, way before this, I would have said no, no, no. I bet this was done right with the batch of everything else. I mean, it fits perfectly in the swing of the rest of the album.
I agree. Yeah. I didn't know that, you know, until we're preparing for this. So, yeah, I think this album fits cohesively together. But the Rover, yeah, this is one of those songs where, what's great about Physical Graffiti is I remember listening to it as a teenager and feeling like maybe I've heard this song before. Almost like every song starts and you're like, huh, this song's on here too. I think I've heard this one. And
Mm.
so every song just feels familiar and like, yep, this is Led Zeppelin doing their thing.
In my time of dying, dude, this is just nasty. This is when I'm listening to Physical Graffiti, I'm like, all right, now we're getting into it, man. That dirty Delta blues vibe in the verse, that funky dissonant guitar that takes us into the heavier parts of the song, and that drum shuffle of Bonham's. The drums sound incredible on this song and recorded in the same way that when the Levee Breaks were recorded. John Paul Jones plays a fretless bass here. It's the longest Led Zeppelin track ever. And it's a reworking of an old, like a lot of Led Zeppelin songs, it's sort of a reworking of an old gospel blues song. This song that they took inspiration from was called Jesus Make Up My Dying Bed. Bob Dylan also had done a version of this early in his folk phase, early in his career. My favorite thing about this song is Page's guitar. It's in open A tuning. You get his slide work and those crunchy, gnarly chords combined with Bonham's shuffle. John Bonham's right foot, man, that kick drum is just next level on this song. I feel like this is when you get to this song, when you get to In My Time of Dying, it's like, okay, all right, this is what we're in for with Physical Graffiti.
Yeah, this song is like, what is going on here? Nobody who can do this.
Right.
And you're right. We didn't talk about it enough at the beginning on how talented these musicians are, as each one. Songs like this is just like, all right, we're gonna show off here. And as a musician, is there anything more fun than that? And it's just jamming with your buddies and you find something that everybody can flow with. It's like, all right, now you take your turn showing off. Now I'm going to take my turn showing off. And, that's, that's what musicians love to do since the beginning of playing instruments together. So, yeah, but that slide and just the effects on the guitars, just the sound of this song is so cool.
So dark too. I love it. And side two, now we've flipped the vinyl over. We're in side two, and we're starting with Houses of the Holy. And I'm going to talk about this album kind of like that because, as you know, um, that's kind of how Jimmy Page thought of this. When they first started off, he told Atlantic Records, who they were first releasing albums through, he was like, look, we're not a singles band, we're an album band. And he really wanted to get on that wave of this new thing that was happening in the late 60s with the FM radio stations and them just like being willing to play in a complete side of an album. And so I think that's how they thought when they were putting albums together. Like, what's the side of this album sounded like more so than singles in particular? So we get to side two, and it starts off with Houses of the Holy. This used to confuse the hell out of me. Obviously, this song was recorded during the Houses of the Holy sessions for that album, and it always blew my. I was like, but Houses of the Holy isn't on Houses of the Holy, and also the band never played this live. Great riff on this song. John Paul Jones holds down this cool groove. It sounds like he's playing with a pick. I'm all about this song. It's fun, and it just kind of gets you into the swing of things going into the side two of Physical Graffiti.
Yeah, this song, you know, builds on the energy that we've already started and just keeps going. I I thought it was interesting when I learned that their reasoning for not releasing this is because they thought Houses of the Holy sounded like, is it Dancing Days? Is that the name of that
Mm-hmm.
song?
Yeah.
And they thought Dancing Days was a stronger single or a stronger track. And so they said, well, we don't want to put that one on here too because they sound too much alike, which maybe backs up my theory of when I'm listening to this, it's like, oh, I think I've heard this before. Maybe it's
Right.
because it sounds like Dancing Days. I don't know. But, I'm like you. I remember listening to this as a teenager, this physical graffiti, and being like, I really want to get to this track and I'm going to skip ahead. And now I'm just like, there's no skip tracks for me.
Right.
I'm gonna listen to all these, and sometimes too because you get to a track and you're like, oh gosh, I forgot about that one because you're so looking forward to one of your favorites, and then something like Houses of the Holy hits, and you're like, oh man, I forgot all about this song's on here.
Takes us to Trampled Under Foot. Dude, again with the clavinet, this is Led Zeppelin at their funkiest. I can't get enough of it, man. Apparently, the band rehearsed extensively to nail that funky groove in this song. Bonham is so good on Trampled Underfoot. The song was supposedly the result of a jam inspired by the song's main riff. John Paul Jones plays the clavinet riff. Page doubles that riff. It's tricky to play up to speed for me, not for Jimmy Page and not for like more seasoned guitarists, but for just your average Joe who likes to pick up the guitar and play along with it. It's tricky and it's a lot of fun. It's really cool clavinet solo from John Paul Jones. It's kind of all over the place. It's kind of just like going crazy. But I love it. This is one of Robert Plant's favorite Led Zeppelin songs. And I have to imagine that for you, I bet this one checks the boxes that you want when you're listening to Physical Graffiti. The Trampled Underfoot sounds like quintessential Josh.
Yes, when I'm thinking of physical graffiti, I'm thinking of Trampled Underfoot, the Wanton song.
Mm.
Those are that's the sound I'm thinking of when I think of physical graffiti, that clavinet, and gosh, yeah, John Paul Jones. We haven't talked enough about him. I had no clue. I knew John Paul Jones was a great bass player and the one who played the clavinet and anything with the keyboard for Led Zeppelin and was awesome in Led Zeppelin, but I had no clue that he was a studio bass player before Led Zeppelin and arranged music for studio, things done in studio where they, gosh, the music industry, isn't it so funny? Like the music industry and the film industry, TV industry, like everything is so glossed up, like the finished product. all we see is the finished product, but we
Mm.
don't see the, like, piecing things together behind the scenes, and they're just like, "Ah, gosh, we've got all these musicians here and we haven't worked out this part. Who can write music for these, who can write sheet music for these studio musicians?" And John Paul Jones like, I can do it, and oh, what about the story from Becoming Led Zeppelin, where he went to Catholic school and, was playing the organ for the Catholic Church in, like, probably, like, age 12, 13. He's, like, playing the organ at the Catholic Church, and then by age 14, the priest asked him to be the head choir master. So he's, like, 14 years old, directed the choir at the Catholic Church. I just thought that was so cool. Those are things I had no clue about when I'm listening to
Right.
Led Zeppelin as a young person. You just think, "Oh, these are cool rock and roll guys," and they're like, "I'll just play the bass guitar," and you have no idea that they're, like, writing sheet music for big time music productions, before he was even in Led Zeppelin.
I do love that there's a level of sophistication that John Paul Jones brings into this. And it's funny that he's the bass player, but he's so much more when you get into this. And not only does he, he'll plays a lot on keys, but you do just get the sense that like there's a depth that comes from adding him in the mix. It's really funny that he's the one that reached out to Jimmy Page about being in the band. It's like, did Jimmy not think like, oh yeah, John Paul Jones, of course, in the background of church music and stuff too makes so much sense. Like in retrospect, it would have been crazy at the time to be like, yeah, you know what this guy was doing 10 years ago? He was he was head of music in this Catholic church, but it just speaks to like the background that he had of both parents being musicians and him being around vaudeville and just like he and Paige are so steeped in a variety of music, this huge range of music. And I feel like they found opportunities throughout Led Zeppelin's career to introduce those. And one great example of this is Kashmir. And what do you say about a song like Kashmir in the running for the greatest Led Zeppelin song ever, one of the greatest rock and roll songs of all time? It's otherworldly, it's massive. It has this Eastern influence, but it's also sort of singular in how it sounds. Page had, okay, so there are a couple different versions of this story. Page had this riff around for a while, never really knew where to take it. The guitar, by the way, is in Dad Gad tuning, Dadgad, very folk sort of tuning. And he and Bonham started working on it at Headley Grange, and it just started coming together. The song received extensive airplay. And even though it's over 8 minutes long, not the type of song that you think is going to get airplay, similar to Stairway to Heaven in that way, just like this long thing that people can't get enough of. It also appeals to people who don't even like Led Zeppelin that much. Now, the other story, John Bonham's son, Jason, who went on to play drums for Led Zeppelin, claimed that John Bonham actually came up with the riff and sang it to Page, who then translated on a guitar. And Jason even says that Page himself told him that. I, I don't know. Who knows? Maybe the combination of both of their ideas is what gave us this classic, but it is an accomplishment. I love those phased drums, the effect that they're using on the drums, those huge strings. I mean, it's perfect. Was Kashmir immediately hitting for you? Did it grow over the years? What's your relationship to this song?
Kashmir did not immediately hit with me.
Mm,
Like upon first listen, it was like kind of I don't know, sporadic and
mm,
discombobulated. Maybe I don't know what
mm,
the word would be. I don't know. I think it's because that riff is like kind of haunting. It's not
hmm.
like it's almost like it's never resolved. And
Right.
so it's a little unsettling, or it's not something that has a hook that immediately you're like, "Oh yeah, that makes sense. I'm gravitating to that." When did Puff Daddy get him to do "Come With Me" for the Godzilla
Oh, I
song?
was
Was that
hoping you
nine
would bring up
was that
the
1997?
it wouldn't yeah, I think 97 is a pretty good guess because it's the Godzilla soundtrack.
I was trying to think, other than us being just hanging out in your basement listening to music and you having Led Zeppelin in your CD case and throwing it in. I don't know why we would have been talking about it, but I do remember that, was it 1994 tour of Page, Plant and Page, or Page and Plant. It seemed like there was some big tour that kind of caught, that was like wildly popular in pop culture, and then that Come With Me was, I mean, that was huge.
It was huge. It was
So
huge.
those are things that like put Led Zeppelin back on the radar for a teenage kid like me, who
Right.
the only thing I know about Led Zeppelin is stuff on the radio, or just like, things that are wildly popular. So I remember hating Come With Me, just thinking that this is just terrible. Like,
Right.
what are we doing here? And it just feeling sorry for Jimmy Page.
You're right.
Like,
Yes.
what in the world? Like, I mean, it probably made him a fortune
Probably.
because, it put Kashmir back on the radio and people want to use it for commercials or whatever. But, you know, I just remember at the time thinking, what in the world are we doing? Thinking, that's not even really that my favorite of a song, and now we're using it as like crossover hip hop, rock hip hop. But to answer the second part of your question, this song has grown on me. Now I love it. Now I look forward to it. Now, when I think Physical Graffiti, I'm immediately thinking, oh, Kashmir's on that album. We're going to hear that because this song is super cool. And I can see why it became a phenomenon for people when it first came out, because it does sound otherworldly. And I love strings with rock and roll.
Oh yeah.
I think strings just elevates almost any kind of music. So I am totally on board with Kashmir today.
I'm glad you brought up "Come With Me" because, man, I feel like the Godzilla soundtrack has come up a few times for us, and it actually was pretty interesting. It had some really cool stuff on there, some really good bands, and this was like the lead single from the Godzilla soundtrack, and the video is like they got Jimmy out there somehow, and I found out later that like Tom Morello produced. Come With Me, which just made me a little sad. It's like, come on, Tom, like, could you have infused a little bit more originality? I remember when it came on, I was already a Zeppelin fan, and I felt entitled enough to be like, this is dumb. The original's so much better. Like, I could already kind of do that posturing. But listening back to it now, there is like, Diddy's not working that hard. He could have worked a little harder here. That, especially the opening. I feel like it's just like a minute and a half of Diddy going like, yeah, yeah. And it's like, come on, man. This is like one of the greatest samples, and you're gonna waste it on that. So Kashmir, we know what the legend that song is, but side three, here we go. In the Light. Again, I feel like we're kind of staying in that otherworldly thing. The band is sticking with some of that Eastern flavor. John Paul Jones seems like he's having a great time on In the Light. Sometimes I wonder if John Paul Jones has a little too much fun in this song, and they could have been like, hey, man, do you want to maybe kick that down to 20, 30 seconds? But what are you going to do? You can't complain too much about this. When Plant's vocals kick in, it's totally worth it. You get that sense of what you're in for with this song. In the Light is one of those tracks that takes you on a journey. It's wicked and it's heavy, and then it's uplifting and almost euphoric. I'm not really clear what John Paul Jones is playing here. There are a few different reports on what it could be, maybe a mini Moog. But there's also a clavinet later in the song. But yeah, dude, In the Light, it's kind of like, it's worth the journey when you get to the high points of the song for me.
I totally agree. This might be my favorite song on the album. I love this song. And it's funny too. It's like, I feel like this song dates itself. It's like, have they been going to Peter Frampton concerts and the Who? I feel like the Who, I don't know who used it first, but I feel like, man, the Who loved using this effect, this mini moog or whatever. I love all the little parts in this song and how they transition. You know, it's like this otherworldly thing, and then it's, rock cymbals just
Oh
like
yeah.
really hard and loud. And then the groove, the groove that they come in with and Plant's voice. I mean, this song has such a groove to it. I love it.
Yeah, man, that kick in. It's just like it's just like sink my teeth into that. Oh, it's so good. I love that song. And okay, now we get into the complete opposite of that. Bronniar. And I've never said it right. I don't know how to say it. I also love the song Bronniar Stomp. Bronniar. I don't know. It doesn't matter. I'm an American. I don't know if you know, you can let us know in the comments. Um, but I can't get it right. Never. Originally recorded in 1970. Beautiful piece. It's one of the many sides of this band that makes them so special to me. It's part of what makes Jimmy Page so special to me, really. To me, this dimension makes him one of my favorite guitarists of all time because he can do flashy and he can do heavy and mystical, but he can do this stripped down, beautiful, intricate finger picking acoustic work. Um, and this song, it's not long, but it gives you a great insight. And he leans a little bit more into this on other albums, but I love that they chose this one to include on Physical Graffiti just because you get that dimension of him when you're talking about the full breadth of what Zeppelin can offer and what he can offer as a guitarist. Beautiful tuning in this CAC GCE. This is an open C6 tuning, so you get that sixth in there, and it's just gorgeous. Page is kind of the man on this front of versatility and creatively. I love that he can go here. I love that he takes us along with him on this journey. And I don't know if this one's just kind of in one ear out the other for you. I'm curious as someone who maybe like I like the guitar aspect of this, but for you, how do you hear this song? Is this kind of just like going with the flow, or where does this hit for you?
This one hits. It's just so gorgeous. I'm down with the journey. The journey's short. I could go even longer with Jimmy if we needed to, but yeah, even even as a non-guitar player, I can I can totally dig the work and the beauty here. Love the tuning. It just sounds so full and rich.
Down by the Seaside, recorded in 1971. I know that this is kind of a sleeper on Physical Graffiti. And I don't, what I mean by that is I don't hear a lot of people talk about it. But I am kind of a sucker for these sort of innocuous tracks that kind of get their way onto albums. It's just this great mellow vibe that's showcasing the band's more country influences. It has this 60s West Coast folk rock vibe going on, and it still takes you to this menacing place about halfway through the track. But I love John Paul Jones' electric piano here, Plant's high pitched harmonies. But Jimmy's guitar parts are what sells the song for me. That fast paced tremolo. I think that Page is probably using his Vox AC30, which means this was an effect that was built into that amp and he could just turn it up. I love this one. I think it's just this beautiful song that continues along nicely from where we just were into where we're going.
Yeah, it gives you this perfect little calm break, with as did the track before it that I won't pronounce. And it's just like, man, we've had some really intense stuff and we've got some really intense stuff coming up. Here's a nice little sweet break. I love that you said sound like had like a Southern California vibe to it. I think musicians go on tour and they play with other people and they hear other people and they're like, "Oh man, that was cool. Let's play that song." And so then they play this song by this other band and then it makes them want to write a song kind of
Mm.
like that. So, I mean, this sounds like it could have been a song by the Doors or you know, but it's just super cool. A lot of these song titles and tracks, song title and lyrics match the titles of the tracks. It's like Down by the Seaside and the lyrics. It's like the music and the lyric, it just puts you in this place. They just match up, sync up so well. And yeah, I think it's sad that maybe people have missed this one because this one's one I look forward to.
Then with 10 years gone, here we are back in the same universe for me. At least when I hear this, I'm thinking like Kashmir and the Light, albeit maybe a bit more bluesy, a bit more of your classic Led Zeppelin. Peak Robert Plant here, some of his stronger lyrics, very autobiographical, which is interesting because Page originally thought this should be an instrumental. Supposedly, Robert Plant told Cameron Crowe, I didn't actually find this interview, but he told Cameron Crowe, this is, by the way, Cameron Crowe was, as a kid, basically, he worked for Rolling Stone and would go out and interview these bands, and that's what Almost Famous, his movie Almost Famous, is based around. Is his time in Rolling Stone. But he's told Cameron Crowe in an interview that he was thinking about a former girlfriend who wanted him to choose between his fans and her. And he said he has to keep going with this thing with Led Zeppelin. And he was thinking about how 10 years on, they probably would have very little in common anymore. And that's kind of the lyrical theme of this song, which I thought was very interesting. Incredible guitar work from Jimmy Page. There are so many riffs that only Page could write. And I think this song contains a lot of those types of riffs. Supposedly more than a dozen guitar overdubs on this song, but it does feel thick and lush and complex. The band is really good on this album of pulling off complexity in a way that doesn't feel convoluted or too clunky. It really works for me. And I think this is one of the other hallmarks of the album.
That's what I've learned that is the genius behind Led Zeppelin, in my opinion, is the knowledge and experience that Jimmy Page and John Paul Jones got from being studio musicians and learning how to use the equipment and be engineers themselves and know how the equipment works and be really good uh, producers and mixers themselves. You know, Jimmy Page was just fanatic about putting in so many parts, you know, and he wanted his album to be an experience. And I mean, it worked. It's the genius of Led Zeppelin. I mean, I think a lot of people would have gotten to a point where they're like, I think that's good. And he's like, nope, nope, here's some more things. I think sometimes when people record, they're like, we're not gonna be able to reproduce this on stage. This is going to be a challenge. So let's not put this on the album. And I think Jimmy Page's philosophy was, look, our album is going to be an experience and our live show is going to be an experience. They're not going to be
Mm,
exactly the same. They're going to be different, but I'm not going to rob the listener or the fan of things that I feel like should go in the song to make the song better. And I'll worry about what we're going to play on stage when we're ready to play on stage, you know. And really, John Bonham and Robert Plant were the same way. You know, they
mm,
didn't settle for what would be okay or good. It was like, oh no, I can hear this extra stuff too. And so, you know, when you had those four together, I mean, they're all trying to inspire one another to be better. So that I think that made the genius because like you said, you record this or you hear this and you're like, who else could have done that? I mean, that's what blows my mind about Led Zeppelin. We just talked
mm.
about Johnny Greenwood saying in 1997 or 1999 that being a guitarist in a rock band is like what are we doing? This has been done. And how can you not, when you're Johnny Greenwood growing up being fans of the Beatles and Led Zeppelin and a gazillion bands that I've probably never even heard of, but you've been a fan of this music and you're like, golly, they've already done all this. What's left to be done? I think your greatest musicians feel like, if I'm not doing something new or adding on, or if I'm just doing something that's already been done, what's the point?
Mm,
So I went on a little tangent there, but that's the genius of Led Zeppelin to me, is they were doing this in the 70s, and
right.
it's like, oh my gosh, like, how do you it's like they've already uh covered it all, and just, I mean, Jimmy Page has already mastered the guitar. It's like people listen to it, it's like, okay, what's left to do on the guitar? This gentleman has covered it all.
It's a great point, and it is. Yeah. I mean, where do you go? And I do think there's something to be said about, like, you know, it's around this time and a little bit after this that, like, the punk movement starts to happen, and people, I think, like, maybe in the face of these giants of rock and roll and what it becomes. And there's a cynical way that you'll hear some of the punk guys talk about, like, Pink Floyd and Zeppelin and these bands. It's like, we don't want to sound like that. But I think that there's something a little bit more earnest, which is like, look, these guys are like gods up there. I mean, they are playing otherworldly things. It's unattainable. It's not something that a human can do. Like, this is superhuman. And the punk movement and the kind of what's going on after this, I do think that there are people, like, you'll hear about Steve Jones from the Sex Pistols, and he'll be like, "Oh, we went to go see them. We went to go see Zeppelin, and it's incredible, and they love it." But it's like, I can't do that. And so that's not the thing that gave them license to go do the thing, because it's like, well, if you just follow that model, then I'm out. But if you do have somebody up there who can barely play and barely tune their guitar, but they just need to get it out, then that's what punk music became. And it was like, so yeah, I think what you're saying is absolutely right. It's like, how do you compete with this? You don't. You don't. You find a completely different way to come at it, and it's the only logical response to hearing stuff like this, is to being like, this is unattainable. So let's find a different path, because we can't do this. Okay, so we're getting into side 4, the home stretch here. I will say, Night Flight. This was recorded in 1971. Band never played this live. This is one of those songs. This might be the only song on Physical Graffiti where it's like, if you and I are just sitting around and you're like, dude, what about Night Flight? Like, my brain may not immediately recall this one. Now, once it kicks in and I listen to it, I'm like, oh yeah, of course, Night Flight, I got it. But this one is one that for me is not like immediately recallable. But it's just classic English blues rock. Nothing crazy on this song, even though it's fairly standard and it can get lost in the mix with everything else. Physical Graffiti has to offer this wide range of things. I mean, if you take this song and you put it on another band's album, it could be like, oh, that's one of the best songs on the album. Here, it's just kind of like business as usual. Quality work, those are my thoughts on Night Flight.
No, you're right. And it has that quality where you're like, it's so funny, while you were talking, I had to look it up. I'd be like, oh gosh, which one's Night Flight? And and it's right. It's like, as soon as it's played, it's like, oh yeah, of course.
Yeah,
And if a Led Zeppelin documentary comes on and this is what's playing in the background, it's like, yep, that's quintessential Led Zeppelin.
right.
That's exactly what Led Zeppelin sounds like. So, yeah, it's funny how this one gets lost amongst some of the giants, but I don't want to skip this one when it comes on. It's like, yeah, this one sounds good too. Let's go.
We're letting it play. And then, but, woo, now we get to the one song. You previewed this a little bit. Man, nothing standard about this. It's one of my favorites off of a Physical Graffiti. And it was one of my favorites from my first listen, when we were listening to this album back in high school and, in college days and all of that. Funky, gritty, hard hitting. The groove gets you immediately. But when that bridge takes you to that wordless chorus, it's just like next level joy to me. And then that gnarly slide brings you back into the verse. This is like funky Led Zeppelin at its best. Bonham hits so hard, but again, he has that swing. He can be funky. Page's riffs really get into your skin here. Same with the solo. And the riff is really just kind of an octave. But it's fast and it's blistering. Page is just firing on all cylinders here at this stage of his career. Plant crushes it too. Robert Plant says that one song is one of his favorite Led Zeppelin songs. It's one of my favorites, and I know that it's on your list too.
Oh yeah, I've got to tell a story. I meant to. I wanted to tell this story before we got started with the tracks, but that's okay. This is a perfect time. So I just remember we are listening to Led Zeppelin together, and I don't own a Led Zeppelin album, and we go to Pack Rats one day. You remember Pack Rats? So
Sure do.
Pack Rats would sell new and used CDs, comic books, collectibles. And so you would find some gems in there because, you know, you could get a used CD and there's no scratches on that bad boy. And, you know, you pay like uh, 2/3 of the price of the sticker price for a new one, so you could rack up in there. So I saw Physical Graffiti, knew nothing about it. I'm just like,
Mm.
wow, here's a Led Zeppelin album I don't know anything about, and it's 2 disc. It's like double the songs for the price of one. I'm gonna go with this one, knowing nothing about it. Just I need a Led Zeppelin album to listen to because I'm just getting into this band. And so from the very beginning, the one song was the one that was like, dude. And I'm sure I played it for you. Like, have you heard this song? We're like, oh yeah. And I remember our whole band listening to it, being like, we want to be tight like this. Like, how
Yes.
do we get so tight? We want to be just like we
Yeah.
want to play so tight, just like this, and have a groove like this. It was like if we could take a song and just be like, what do we want to sound like? It was the one song,
One song.
and so uh fast forward a little bit. I remember being a freshman in college and okay, I'm a freshman in college. I'm in the dorms, and it's like everybody's going to the dance club. Everybody's going to Fergie's. You remember Fergie's? The 18 and up dance club between
Yep.
like Campbellsville and Lebanon. And so it's like, all right, we're going to put on some nice clothes and go mingle with some singles. Uh, and I remember getting ready in my dorm room. I was like, what do I want to put on to get me ready to dance? And I would always put on the one song. It's like, this is my getting ready to go out dancing song to get me in the groove. So I thought that was funny. I wanted to share that with you. But yeah, one song, man, that's just, this is the example of tight groove to me, and maybe my favorite drumming of any
Mm.
song on the planet. I just love the drums on this song. I still I love watching video of John Bonham playing drums because I just
Yeah.
don't even comprehend how he gets his hands to hit everything that he's hitting. It just blows my mind how he even accomplishes it, much less on beat. And he's like a daggum metronome. I mean, he
Yeah.
never misses anything. This song, this is on my list of greatest songs of all time.
Love that, dude. The Fergie's, I love that poll. That's great. And you're right. The funny thing too is that what you didn't say there when we're all listening to it is like we need to sound like the one song. The one thing we weren't saying is we need to play the one song because it's like good luck. Good luck. I remember looking up like tabs for this and trying to figure out what Paige was doing and just being like, sorry, guys, I can't. I don't have it in me. But let's sound like that. You know what I mean? It's like
Let's
I
just
can't.
be on point as they are. Just nobody. I mean, there's not like the silences are so great. Like
Yeah.
this song is so tight. That's what makes a good tight song. I think that's why I love Spoon so much. It's
Mm,
like those tight grooves
yeah.
where when people are playing in a staccato fashion, you know, you have all this silence in
Yeah.
between notes and percussion. And when all those silences just line up, it's like, man, it's like this
Mm.
is over the top.
Yeah, man. That space, that syncopation. Um, quite a different song follows up one song with Boogie with Stu, recorded in January 1971. I've always loved this song. You get John Paul Jones on a mandolin. You have Ian Stewart, who played a lot with the Rolling Stones on piano, was actually a founding member of the Rolling Stones and then just ended up playing a lot of their stuff. Page is just on an acoustic. But I've been a sucker for this song, which is mostly just a jam captured at Headley Grange a few years before the Physical Graffiti sessions. Plant sounds great. Here's an interesting tidbit about this song. So he borrows, which is a common thing that Zeppelin borrowed a lot. They borrowed some of Richie Valens' "Ooh My Head." He even says that line in the song. Richie Valens, of course, had died years earlier in that famous plane crash that also killed Buddy Holly and the Big Bopper. So the band, who were never great at crediting people they borrowed from, actually included Richie Valens' surviving mother's name in the songwriting credits, maybe as a nod of recognition. But then the Valens estate ended up suing the band, and Page said, his quote is, "What we tried to do was give Richie's mother credit because we heard she never received any royalties from any of her son's hits." And Robert did lean on that lyric a bit. So what happens? They tried to sue us for all of the song, and we had to say bugger off. We could not believe it. So anyway, if there's any plagiarism, just blame Robert. Um, my favorite thing about this song, though, is Bonham's drum part, which is just the same thing being played over and over. He just uses a bass drum, tambourine, and some unknown hard surface. There's a bit of reverb and delay on it, but that groove is infectious. And I feel like this should be just like, I don't know if somebody sampled that beat, but it's like, why not? Like, I feel like this thing it almost sounds like a sample in the song itself because of the way it's treated. But that's always been the thing that keeps me going. It's so cool. The groove of this song is one of the coolest of any song.
Yeah, that's interesting. It does sound like a drum machine or
Yeah.
a drum loop, and I love the piano. It gives it that cool bluesy sound, but it reminds me of a lot of lanes that a lot of other giants like the Beatles and Rolling Stones have gone with singles with using that old bluesy piano as an accompaniment. But yeah, this song's so cool, and the one song just kind of flows right into this one. I've never missed a beat with Boogie with Stu, and just always let it roll right into the next one.
And then I get the same kind of vibe with Black Country Woman. This is also another one taken from a different recording session. This was actually recorded in May of 1972 outside of Mick Jagger's Manor Stargroves. This was recorded literally outside. I love this acoustic blues, more mandolin, more John Paul Jones on the mandolin. Page is on his Martin D28 in an open G tuning, which is DGD, GBD. Straightforward song. I absolutely love it. Led Zeppelin just excels at this. And the lyrics are great too. You didn't have to make me a total disgrace. You didn't have to leave me with that beer in my face. This song, to me, you could plug it off of Physical Graffiti, and it's just like, this is a really good distillation of this lane, this gear of Led Zeppelin. And I love that they included it on Physical Graffiti.
Yeah, they stay right in that Delta blues lane with the lyrics. It reminds you of blues lyrics. One of the things I love about Robert Plant is he gives you this Southern soul, hey, hey, mama, things that you would hear in much different style.
Then we close it out with Sick Again, supposedly about the many groupies Plant encountered. He told Cameron Crowe, again, when Cameron Crowe was writing for Rolling Stone, that he felt a bit sorry for the groupies, and he tried to convey that in the lyrics. This is sort of vintage Led Zeppelin for me, close out the album. But it's a little bit of a different look than the other songs on the album. It's also a little quirky in its timing. It has some 5/4 thrown in occasionally, but great interplay, again, between Robert Plant and Jimmy Page. The bedrock rhythm section of Bonham and Jones. Just this really classic vintage Zeppelin way to land the plane on Physical Graffiti. And I think it's a, it's not the one that people are talking about, but I think this is a great way to end the album.
It's not that tight groove like Trampled Under Foot or the Wanton song, but it's that sound, that distorted guitar with all the energy. And like you said, this just sounds like Led Zeppelin. This sounds like Custard Pie, and what Sick Again sounds like what I think when I think of Physical Graffiti, what I'm getting into with that. So yeah, what a great way. It's like bookends, Custard Pie and Sick Again kind of give you that attitude of what we were trying to accomplish in the studio with this album. You made me think of another story that I thought was so cool about Led Zeppelin. When they first got together to practice, Jimmy Page, I think, already had an idea for a drummer, and then Robert Plant's like, dude, I don't know who that guy is, but he's not as good as the guy I know. I
Yeah.
already know that. There's one drummer we need. He is unbelievable. You've got to hear him. His name's John Bonham. And I remember the hearing what John Bonham said. I mean, what John Paul Jones was like. He was like, "Well, I can't wait to see what this drummer's like because, if we can't play together, we're gonna have to get a different drummer. Like we're the rhythm section. We're gonna have to have this relationship. And if I can't play with him, then one of us is gonna have to go." So it was like, let me see if I can play with this fella. And it was like it wasn't 3 or 4 minutes. He's like big eyes, look around everybody like, yep, this guy's gonna work just fine. we're gonna have a great relationship here.
I love, and you're right. They talk about that in the Becoming Led Zeppelin documentary that just recently, or I guess maybe last year, was came out on Netflix. That first time that they get together to play, I think that's such a cool story. It's just like it was kind of there from the beginning. Like you had the hopes. It's like, Jimmy Page is like, I'm kind of the sole member of the Yardbirds left. Am I going to carry on this name or whatever? But whatever it is, I don't care what it's called so much as I have to keep going, and I want to do it my way. I'm tired of listening to what everybody else wants to do, and making these singles that feel like they're not that, at the time, I think it even said like he saw the game of writing singles and releasing singles kind of destroy the morale of bands and just eat away. And he's like, that's not going to be me, but I have to be in control. And so he is, and he's like, I'm forming a band. First thing I got to find is a singer. Finds Robert Plant. And then, of course, John Bonham is recommended by Robert Plant, and then John Paul Jones calls him. Anyway, they get together, and it's this place that Jimmy Page has lined up, and they're practicing, and they get together, and he has an idea for a song that he wants to work on. They start playing it, and it's just like, this is exactly what we wanted to happen. Like there were no like, this guy's got to get it up to speed or whatever, but they're just all so good and so at the top of their game that it's just perfect from the get-go. You think about the control that Page had over this band, and not that he was like the puppet master or anything like that, or like too tight-fisted, but he put himself and those guys in a position where it's like we're not having to listen to the producer or the labels, and they go and they record the first album basically on their own. And so by the time they go to Atlantic, who is that's the label that they want to distribute everything, and they go talk to Jerry Wexler, and Peter Grant goes with them, right? And like they're going to show him the album, because it's like they're not going in being like, we need money to record an album. It's like, no, I've recorded the album, I did it already, and here it is. Do you want it? So you come in, all the creative decisions have already been made, and that just continues throughout the rest of their career. And it's how we get albums like Physical Graffiti, because it's just like there's no interference from anyone else. We have pure creative control over this thing. it is kind of what makes Zeppelin special. There's this now it becomes a beast, and I think it starts to get away from them a little bit. And I think after Physical Graffiti, look, there's some great songs, like Achilles' Last Day. There are moments, there are great moments after this, but I feel like Physical Graffiti is probably when they were like, this is it. This is the best that we got. And then after this, some people are going to have some strongly worded comments about presence or what have you. But for me, this is kind of the pinnacle. It's exhausting being in a juggernaut like this. They create this beast of a band, and it's exhausting to tour and to keep up this pace. And it starts to get the better of them, I think, but not here. Here, they're a little frayed, they're a little spent, they're a little burnt out from touring, but they are still like, what's the best we can do? What's the absolute best? We will not settle for it. To your point earlier, we won't settle for anything less than exactly what we think is the perfect song, is the perfect album. And it's interesting that they had all these shelved songs that they decided to put here because it works. And some people will use that as a detriment, and they'll be like, Physical Graffiti sounds a little scattered, a lot of the criticisms that people would say about the White Album, that we talked about, people are going to levy at Physical Graffiti. But for people like us, and there are a lot of us who are diehards for Physical Graffiti, I think it's absolutely the case that, like, hey, I don't care that this was recorded 4 years earlier in a completely different location. Somehow it works. And I do think it's the band at their best. So I'm really glad that you chose this one to talk about.
Jimmy Page talked about, when he was writing music, he was thinking, gosh, I don't know what melodies or vocals are going to be on this, but I want to make sure this music is really beautiful and inspiring so that whenever Plant hears this, he'll, put something really amazing to it that'll be as good as what I think the guitar part is. So I thought it was interesting that a lot of Jimmy Page's work it was like, I don't really have an idea for a melody, but I sure hope this beautiful guitar playing inspires Plant to write this beautiful melody. My first memories of getting this album, I'm thinking I'm probably like 17, 18 years old when I'm at Pack Rats in probably 1988 or 99 buying Physical Graffiti. And think about this. I'm about to blow your mind. Are you okay with this?
I'm ready.
You're sitting down, right?
Let's go.
So that would have been the album would have been 24 years old. So I would be 19 years old going and buying an album that's 24 years old.
Wow.
If a 19-year-old today went to a record store and purchased records that were 24 years old, those would be records that came out in 2002. So they might be purchasing Yankee Hotel Foxtrot or Songs for the Deaf by Queens of the Stone Age or One by One by Foo Fighters. I was just putting that in perspective. When I was 19, listening to Physical Graffiti, it seems so old and so removed from present day. And it would be like a 19-year-old, think of a 19-year-old, one of your buddy's kids goes to the record stores and buys Yankee Hotel Foxtrot for the first time. Is just like, man, this sounds like it's from another era, another time.
Gosh, you really did blow my mind there. It did. It always felt like that, and that game is always just makes my jaw drop because think about that. What happened in the 70s, the 60s, and the 70s, and the 80s? You listen to like early 60s music, or you listen to what Zeppelin, like, think about that. Think about like Zeppelin. They're, just like 15 years, 16 years, maybe a little bit more before the recording of Physical Graffiti, the thing that's blowing their mind is Lonnie Donegan. You know what I mean? It's like skiffle music in England. And it's, it's like, that's their thing, right? And it's like, you think of the light year jump that you get from that to physical graffiti. And then you get up to the 90s and you get up to like, it's like the advances start to become a little more incremental once you get to Yankee Hotel Foxtrot or Songs for the Deaf. You know what I mean? It's like those don't. I don't know. Maybe if you are 19, it does sound like wow, like we really had to dig through the archaeological, like like I don't know. It feels like the progress was slower, but in the 70s there was just this explosion of like we're doing things differently, and I think Zeppelin had such a huge hand in that.
It just hit me when I was on Spotify and pulled up Physical Graffiti, and it said, I think it said 74 or 75. I guess it was 75 when it came
Yeah,
out. And I was like, huh, 75. I was like, I probably got this in the 90s. And I was like, huh, it wasn't that old when I got it. It seemed like it was so old. You know,
it
when we were
did.
19, the Beatles and Led Zeppelin just seemed so long ago, but it was not that long ago.
And you think now it's like that's half a century ago. Like it's like over 50 years old, physical graffiti. And like this does not sound like this isn't like Artie Shaw or like Benny Goodman. You know what I mean? This is not like, like your granddad's music. I mean, I guess it is at
But
this
you're
point.
right. You're right. The jump was so huge right there in the 60s and 70s, where
Yeah.
you take like the first Beatles album and
Oh
then compare
gosh.
it to like the White Album. I mean,
Right.
what a jump. So
Yes.
it was these giants in the studio that really pushed these things forward. The
Yeah.
giants like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and Led Zeppelin and those bands that had longevity, that recorded multiple albums, to like see their career, how they started and what music sounded like then, to where it was 10 years later in their career. These bands just really push things forward, I think.
Mm. Man, I'm so glad you picked this. The great thing about Led Zeppelin is with just so much quality work, we kind of have our pick of other albums to revisit over the years. I mean, is it Led Zeppelin 4? Is it Led Zeppelin 2 or 3 or is it Houses of the Holy? Like there's so much to go back and look at and talk about that I'm sure that we would I'm sure both of us would be happy to revisit another Zeppelin album someday. And if you've stuck with us this long and you've listened or watched the whole episode, then give us a like, follow us in podcast world, or subscribe to us on YouTube. Give us a suggestion and tell us like how did you find physical graffiti? Was this a real time thing? Were you there and ready for it when physical graffiti came out? Did you also, like us, find it later, maybe have it handed down to you from somebody else? Are you a 19-year-old who just found physical graffiti? Either way, we want to hear from you. This has been a blast, buddy. I'm so glad that you picked this album, and yeah, stick around because we'll be back next time with another deep dive into the music that you love.
Everybody needs the light.